Longevity Lifestyle Center. This is Govin here with secretsoflongevity.com. Been thinking a little bit about the Greek ideas surrounding love. They talk about 4 main types of love that people can experience. I think it's a good philosophy and idea to take in and compare it to most people's understanding of love and what it even is, what it means to them, and look at the aspects of this that can actually improve us in terms of our psychological health, because I think a lot of people have an unhealthy idea of love. And there's actually a 5th type of love that the Greeks talk about, which I think is the one that most closely resembles the type of love you see often portrayed in movies, in your typical sort of loving relationship. Not to say that people's love isn't legitimate when they're in a loving relationship with a significant other, but we should analyze in ourselves and in our perception of and understanding of love if this is present in us, and work at moving towards the other types. So I'll start off with the one type that is sort of a side type. It could be called the 5th type of love, but it's seen as a negative type in more or less in the Greek philosophy. Maybe they don't actually see it as negative, but it has a negative connotation to it, and that's called mania. And I'll quickly actually just list the 5 so we know what we're talking about here, and then I'll get to describing each one. So there's mania, which is somewhat seen as unhealthy. It's obviously has to do with obsession. Then of course everyone's heard of Eros, which is attraction and almost sexualized love, but it doesn't always have to be sexual. It's a very deep longing. Then you have philia, which is often what one feels towards friends and just a community. Then you have Storegate, or Storge, or Storge. And that is seen as more like a motherly love, or what love you have for really close family. Then you have Agape, which is universal love or unconditional love, often associated with the love of a specific type of deity or veneration for a deity. But it can also be unconditional love towards other people. But basically it's love without any expectation for that feeling to be returned. So it's the most selfless love. So let's get back to that idea of mania. We see this uncontrollable, passionate love. Just basically think of Romeo and Juliet, the one that would endanger your life, endanger your health, both mentally and physically. And this is the type of love which can, in time, turn into other types. So it's not the end of the world if you're amidst and taken up by this kind of passion. But it can lead us to a place of being so attached to someone that if you're not feeling in return, it can be extremely painful. So that is one that one probably sees a lot more in the mainstream culture that's aimed at younger people. When you see all these images in TV and movies, they're often aimed at showing this extreme obsession within youth and their fleeting relationships that they encounter. Of course, Romeo and Juliet is the actual story is between 2 very young preteens. And you really don't see that many adults having this sort of obsessive, all-encompassing thing that totally takes over your mind and makes you unable to function on a day-to-day basis. So it doesn't mean you can't love someone and have them coming up in your mind and feeling very deeply for them, but it just means it's not hindering your life in some way. So the word mania, we get all these words like pyromania or kleptomania, and it's this obsession that you can't control, this manic side to it. So it does have an unhealthy connotation to it, and just by reflecting on that, I think you can start to see how, perhaps if you've ever had this in yourself, experience this, or if you see yourself getting into it, by reflecting on all these different types of love, you can perhaps mentally direct yourself to healthier avenues, perhaps. Then you have Eros. The name obviously comes from Eros, the Greek god of love. He was sort of like a Cupid type character, not in terms of appearance, but similar role. Could also be likened to Aphrodite. So Eros is that root word that gives us erotic. So it has that sexual connotation, but it doesn't have to be sexual. It's again a very passionate drive to connect to something. So Eros, it has a lot to do with feeling. So you're loving the feeling you get from something. So that's why eroticism, or the sexual component, is in there, because that's a very primal, deep urge and feeling that one has. So it's obviously very healthy to feel Eros, especially when in a relationship with an intimate partner or partners, and that's a pretty key foundation to a successful relationship. And there's ways of building that and cultivating that, which I've covered in past videos. I'm not going to go into that here. So philos or philia, love, is obviously a lot of words get philia attached to it, necrophilia. I don't know why that one comes to mind first, but all those root of that word gets attached to things to show attraction to things. Now the actual Greek definition of it just means more like brotherly love or friendly love. So it's that companionship type feeling you have with friends, a certain group of people that understand you a little bit more than your average person on the street, perhaps. So this is the type of feeling that grows over time. It's rarely suddenly just sparked suddenly the way mania or Eros can be. So it's a very much a building up over time, and it's easily broken down if someone betrays you in some way or does something that, pushes you away, then that can damage that feeling. Now, Storegate is that, like I was describing, is that motherly love, that love you would feel almost if you're responsible for someone. I'd imagine if you had children, you'd feel this type of love. If you had people you were responsible for, if you were some sort of leader, you'd feel that kind of love. So it's often defined as love you have for someone that's dependent on you. So if you don't have anyone dependent on you, then you might not be familiar with this, but in the context of a relationship, you've probably heard me talk about some things, maybe on my vlogging channel at times, about more traditional relationship dynamics, and you can almost work in Storegate type feelings, or Storge, whatever you want to call it. It's a funny word to say, I think. But you can work those feelings into a dynamic if you're providing something for your partner that they can't provide for themselves. And they might be even doing it in return. So you might even be mutual. It might be one way, or it might be someone feels that for you. That's not a bad thing. So if you're the one making all the money, you're providing that for someone, and when you're taking your partner out to dinner, you'd feel perhaps a little bit of that type of love for them. And maybe if your partner is particularly good at cooking, I'm not trying to foster any stereotypes here, it could work both ways. Then when that person's making food for you, they would probably feel that on some level, that providing for type of love. It's that feeling of service to another person who you care for. And that's a very wonderful type of feeling. But of course, that being a parent is obviously the epitome of this, where you have someone that's so completely dependent on you that you are able to provide them in that way. And that final one, agape, is a very spiritual-based, unconditional love. This is one that can be felt suddenly, or it can be built over time. I didn't get to it actually on the Storegate one, but Storegate is often felt a certain way and it stays that way. It's hard for that to break, especially when you're a parent, obviously. So with agape, it's something that builds almost like philia or philos, but it's also not as breakable because it's coming from inside yourself. This is one that you build and it doesn't really go away unless you just completely forget how to do it for some reason. This could be likened to what Buddhism and a lot of these more internal-based spiritual traditions talk about when you're working on yourself to feel unconditional love. A lot of the religions of the world, while they kind of talk about it, don't know how to do it very well. At least their actions in the world don't convey that very well. But when you're able to harness this feeling and, like I'm saying, build upon it, I think, in my opinion, this is the one that has the best effects for your own health. And it's that unconditional feeling of just wanting to see the best in people, wanting to provide the best for people. And it boils down to simple compassion. So it is definitely the epitome of charitability, giving something, expecting nothing in return, just knowing that by giving it, you're improving someone, you're improving the world, even if it happens in some way that you can't directly perceive. So even the reward of perceiving it is something you do not need to have. You just give for the sake of giving. And you heard me talk a lot about Shen and the heart, Jing, Qi, and Shen. If we're to talk about Shen as one of the third treasure that we want to cultivate and preserve and grow, agape is the synonymous with this idea. It's the energy of the heart, that subtle quality that we want to protect and grow. When we're really damaged in some way, that can obviously be hurt and unable to be cultivated and be felt. So the more you can feel that in your life, and the more you can choose to feel that, because it is simply a choice. And as you get used to feeling it, you can get into that space very easily and more easily. And you feel that and you let it grow and radiate outwards from you. So by feeling that, it puts you in a very relaxed state, it puts you in a very harmonious state, and while it's not scientifically proven in any way, we can surmise that being in that loving state is going to be very healing to your own body as well as people around you. So most of our relationships, meaning any kind of connection with other people we have in our lives, can fall into any of these categories. Obviously, they can all fall under agape. We can foster that quality and that feeling into those relationships. But our connections with other people can start to include these other ones. Perhaps the connections we make that are intimate connections with partner or partners are going to be the ones that can include the most of these. And obviously we're not trying to foster the mania one, hopefully, but out of the four most healthy forms of love, of the Greek descriptions of love, you can easily feel Eros with an intimate partner. You can feel really good friendship and camaraderie. You can feel Storegate and that responsible love if you're in a position of providing them with something that they can't provide for themselves. And then of course, unconditional love can be felt at all times, and that can be built for them as well as the world around you. So that really makes up the most powerful, strongest, healthiest type of relationship, in my opinion. It's going to be one that works in all those different types to some degree. And let me know what you thought about this video in the comments below. Perhaps you can identify with those, perhaps not. Maybe there's another angle you think is missing from these four types of love that the Greeks described in ancient times. And also rate the video if you feel so inclined, share it amongst friends, and with that, take care and embrace life without limits.